Who do we have, everybody?
All right, we're going live.
We have everybody on?
I don't know.
Anthony, are you with us?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Anthony, now I don't know if Carm was gonna be able to make it. He was gonna try, but I don't see Carm on, so I will call the meeting to order. I will call our special school committee meeting to order at 4:00. And this meeting was called specifically for one purpose and one purpose only, to have us discuss and take a vote on whether we will be playing winter sports or we will not be playing winter sports. This is a special meeting, so there will not be any citizen speak time or any of the other activities that go with a regular meeting. So at this point, I'm going to ask Mrs. Hoffman to introduce the information we have, and I would just like to thank Dave Stratton, who's on the call with us, for gathering all this information and getting it to Alexis, and for Alexis for sending it out to the committee members so that they could have a look at this yesterday and today to have an update on what some of the adjustments are being made with this. So at this point, Alexis, would you call the roll, and then I will turn it over to Mrs. Hoffman.
Mrs. Reed?
Here.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Here.
Mrs. Rua?
Here.
Mr. Minio? Ms. Dugan?
Here.
Mr. Bonavita?
Here.
And Mayor Sapelli.
Here,
6 present, 1 absent. We have a quorum.
thank you. Mrs. Hoffman.
Yes, so as you can see with the documents that were forwarded to you, it wasn't exactly light reading, but I think that goes to show you all of the time that has been put into looking at our winter sports and the modifications that the experts and the board that were put together were I'm sorry, there's a little bit of an echo and a little feedback. Yeah, maybe Don and Anthony, if you could mute for now.
I just did. Or I will, anyway.
Thank you. Maybe that will help. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so sorry, a lot of time and effort went into these documents. They are based on the EEA for youth sports, which the MIAA then took and had certain committees. And I'm going to have Dave walk you through all this because he has been an integral part of most of these committees on modifications, where they have spent hours and hours of time and discussion on how we can make these sports safe for our student athletes. I also want to say, because I know Dave is not going to do this himself, but his background is in sports medicine and sports health. So he brings more than just his athletic director certification to the table when it comes to sports, and we really appreciate that. And we thank him for his input and his time and his research and everything he's done to bring these committees his expertise, but also bring our town the communication from not only the MIAA, but the PVIAC, which is our local leagues, which have taken it upon themselves to put in some more precautions. As many of you might know, so winter sports have already started in many towns across the state. PVIAC has decided to delay the start of the winter season for certain reasons. And right now the start date is scheduled for January 11th. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave now, who can give you more specifics about our league, about the modifications for winter sports. And then he and I will answer any and all questions you may have.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mrs. Hoffman. The guidelines, just so you can understand the guideline process, each sport has a committee at the state level, and all of the Western Mass athletic directors, some of us have the duty of sitting on some of these committees. I sit on the softball committee as a sport committee, but I also sit on the sports medicine committee we've been very busy since March. Sports medicine consists of doctors, dentists, athletic trainers, emergency medical physicians, some orthopedic surgeons, and just recently we have two infectious disease physicians that have been helping us out, most notably Dr. Sandy Nelson, who's also is working with DESE. So we've been really, really fortunate to have that. Each sport committee for the winter started working on their proposals for guidelines for modifications to the sport. And they have a lot of feedback from other states and things like that, but namely what they use is the document from the EEA office under the guidance of Lieutenant Governor Healy. So I always have to look it up, but it's the Energy and Environmental Affairs Office, and they're in charge of amateur and youth sports, which high school sports fall under. So in using the most recent EEA document, and as most of you know, this has changed several times and may even change again with the governor's meeting this afternoon. The sport committees drop some proposals. They bring those through a process. The first process is they bring it before sports medicine. And we spent the better part of 8 hours over 2 days going through the winter sports guidelines and looking at them through the lens of a medical perspective. Not so much we don't like the rule that they put in, like those of you that know when soccer went through, there's no throw-ins. We couldn't say we don't like that. That's a rule, but that's a soccer thing. That's not a health thing. They did it for a health purpose, but we wouldn't change it because we don't like the fact that they eliminated throw-ins. So we can look at it from the lens of medicine only. So when these sports committees did their modifications, they brought them to us. We went through it over the better part of 2 evenings. After they pass through the sports medicine committee, they go to the COVID-19 task force, which is a separate committee that was put together in March by the MIAA board of directors. That consists of principals, athletic directors, and members. Sports medicine has 2 members on it. One is Dr. Calandrio, who is the former president of the Athletic Trainers of Massachusetts. He's a professor at Bridgewater State College. And Dr. Alan Ashier, he is the chair of the Sports Medicine Committee with the MIAA and a Boston area physician, emergency and sports medicine physician. So once it passes through COVID-19 task force, then it goes to the MIAA board of directors for a vote. The board of directors votes, and then the guidelines are approved. So I just wanted you to know the process that those things go through. Locally, the PVIAC has some input. We can make decisions locally through our District 1 committee. We are now considered District 1. There was redistricting in the MIAA. It goes to the District 1 committee, and they approved any changes that our conference, the PVIAC, decides to make. I sit on both the executive board for the PVIAC, which made the decision to move to January 11th, and the District 1 committee for the MIAA, which reaffirmed that and voted on that. I'm a non-voting member of the second committee, however. I'm still just kind of hanging on and learning. So that's basically the process. So are there any questions on the process, I guess? Okay. The individual sport modifications were, Alexis is so efficient, I'm sure she shared these with you. I know they read like how to put a really expensive electronic device together. They're not easy to read sometimes. But just for your own knowledge, the first section of each modification is the same. You might have noticed that. Those are general information kind of things that basically was written by sports medicine. We had most of the input in that part. We wrote that way back. It's changed a little bit since the fall, but basically it's the same as our fall modifications. When you thumb through the individual sport, like I'll take ice hockey, for example, the ice hockey modifications specific to the game begin under ice hockey specific modifications. Same for basketball, same for alpine skiing and swimming and diving. So that's where you're going to see the changes that were made by the sports committees to the game. So when looking through those, if you've read the first part of this document, you've run that, you've read them all. They're pretty much the same. And even when we're talking about different sports like swimming, the verbiage doesn't change until you get the swimming and diving modifications.
So Dave, as we noticed your frequently asked questions document, which I thought was very helpful and summarized a lot, could you just tell us, just like in the fall, there were a couple sports that were unable to compete, and it seems as though there are the same here. Can you walk us through the sports we're talking about?
Sure, absolutely. We made some changes locally to our sports schedule, even though the MIAA had sort of came up with that. They call it Fall 2, but we've been referring to it as kind of the floating season because not only fall sports are going there. There's many areas like the Berkshires, for example. Most of the Berkshires and Franklin County moved their soccer to Fall 2, which is happening after the winter season is over. What we did here in the PVIC is we changed some of the dates, which we're allowed to do by the MIAA through our own District 1 committee. We're governed locally through our own committee. So winter will now start on the 11th of January and will run through the 28th of February. On March 1st, we'll begin that Fall 2. Fall 2 is where indoor track is going. If you noticed in the FAQ document, I had a little heading that said, what about wrestling and indoor track? Because we have our indoor track program is very big. Just speaking about indoor track, there really isn't anywhere to run. We run at Smith College, which one of our members is very, is familiar with, so seven sister schools. But at the end of the day, we can't get in there, and Springfield College isn't going to let us in, and any of the other facilities that have a track for very good reason. I mean, they don't even want too many of their own students there. So without a place to run, the track and cross country committee with the MIAA came up with the proposal to move the sport to Fall 2, which I think was a good move because if you look at our dates of March 1st, that's really only a week or so before we would usually go out. About 14 days before we'd usually. We're counting on it being snowy. We are. But if we do have a mild enough winter to get outside, we can begin track with running a winter season, which has different rules than spring, and then we can roll that right into the spring. So that's where indoor track went. Football, as many of you remember from the fall, that's where football is going to be placed. So football would also be starting March 1st. And wrestling has been removed from the winter because modifications to a sport like wrestling are really impossible. So what we're looking to do is buy ourselves some time. MIAA Wrestling Committee proposed to the board of directors of the MIAA to move wrestling to the spring. So wrestling has been moved to the spring season. So for us, the spring would begin April 26th, and it would run through July 3rd, although we don't have to use that entire period of time.
Right.
So that FAQ document has a lot of answers. I made that up because parents were really looking for some information. So that's up on our website, just so everyone knows. Mr. Wojcik has put it up on the website for us.
So Mr. Stratton, we're not going to be voting on wrestling, football, or indoor track at this meeting right now. We're just going to be voting on those sports that will start January 11th and January 11th only. And those sports are which day?
Well, boys and girls basketball, boys and girls hockey, because we have a cooperative team with Long Meadow, and boys and girls swimming and diving.
How about
and boys and girls alpine skiing as well.
Thank you.
I almost left them out.
Questions anybody may have with regard to any of the sports we're going to be voting on? The swimming and diving, basketball, skiing, or ice hockey? Mrs. Rua, and then Ms. O'Connor.
Hi, I'm actually really excited about all the details in here. Thank you so much for the work you did, Dave. Question that I just didn't see it. It's very possible because there was a lot of stuff in there. If a player tests positive, what's the protocol for the rest of the team?
Well, there's a little bit of a change there because when we were outdoors, it's a little bit easier. Not everyone is considered a close contact. It's been talked about quite a bit. Dr. Nelson was talking about it in our sports medicine committees and things like that. I mean, really, the MIAA leaves it up, rather than dictate what they would consider a close contact, from the state down. And I think we've seen that not only from the governor's office down, but even in our state associations. They leave it as a local decision. Both me, in collaboration with the principal and Mrs. Hoffman, and our own health department would determine close contacts. I think in a sport like basketball, for example, which I believe is probably the closest contact, even more so than hockey. Close contacts would definitely be more frequent, and probably would be the sport that if we did have a positive case and there was exposure, that there would be some legwork done, not only by, me as a quasi administrator with the principal and the central office staff, but also with our own health department. So we would contact trace in that fashion. Just so everybody knows, before I forget, we did this in the fall too. Tim Jakes and I, along with Maria Drake, came up with a form, and I'll send you a copy of this so you can see it. But basically, each student has to come with a daily check-in, a COVID sheet, and they have to circle that, no symptoms, in various ways. Did you take your temperature today? If you did, what was it? So on and so forth. And that's a great way for us to contact trace. I thought the coaches would be upset with me creating more paperwork. They actually liked it because it gave them the ability to know who was at practice. We had some close contact scares, but we didn't have any kind of cases that were associated with athletic competition or practice, which was great. But we were ready for it. We had, even the coaches fill those out. We want to know who's there. We want to know who's available. So before I forget, I wanted to show you that. So, but the short answer, Mrs. Ruhl, would be, it would really be a local decision, the same way as if there were somebody in a classroom or someone involved on the bus, etc.
I would think Dave, that the skiing would be at the other end of that spectrum because they are outside. That would be less contacts, probably. Well,
skiing, yeah. It's, the biggest thing that we had in our conversations with sports medicine with skiing was at the gates at the beginning, at the starting gate, what to do there and what to do at the finish. And because people like to collect at the bottom and watch everyone finish. So there was some talk about that, which you'll notice in the document. It addresses the start and finish a great deal.
Okay, Mrs. Roy, go ahead. I think you had another question, and I'll get to Ms. O'Connor.
Yeah, I only had one other question, and again, maybe it's just not something I'm understanding, but if you're swimming and diving, which I'm again all for, do you wear a mask? Is there a special swimming mask that you wear?
That's an excellent question that actually Mr. Bonavita emailed me a couple of questions too, and that was one of his questions, which I was going to leave to answer to the entire group, but I promised him I'd cover some of his questions. If you look in the swimming and diving guidance, it says right under guidance and best practices for high school dual meets in the swimming and diving one, down on the fourth bullet, it'll say swimmers can unmask as they step onto the starting block. So we're not going to drown anybody. We're not going to make them swim with the mask on.
Well, I thought there was a special swimming mask. I don't know. I just didn't understand.
That'd be, hey, I'm thinking about that'd be a good invention. But I think that was, we were fortunate because the eastern part of the state, a lot of the schools swam this fall. So we learned a little bit from them, because in certain parts of the state, swimming is a fall sport, or they separate boys and girls at the fall and winter. So we learned a little bit from the eastern schools. One of the tips was that everyone have a plastic bag to place their mask in, and that someone comes around, usually gloved, or they sanitize their hands afterwards and place all the masks into a bin and bring them away. And then, of course, they can safely bring them back at the end of the race. Just to address swimming, if any of you have a question about dual meets, we're very fortunate with swimming that we can actually run these meets virtually. And the conference is really looking in that direction. Rather than having two schools at the same pool, that we would run, say we were swimming against West Springfield, we would swim in our pool with two officials present. They would swim in theirs with two officials present. We would score the meet with times and things like that, like we normally would. It's just scorekeeping would take a little bit of work. And we wouldn't necessarily know who won until maybe the next day. But that looks to be the direction that swimming is going to go.
Thank you. That's an awesome explanation. I wondered about that too. These are very detailed, I think. Thank you.
Ms. O'Connor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Stratton, for all your hard work and the many committees that you sit on and your expertise. I just have a question about the ventilation system. So in facility operations, page 14 of the Office of the Energy Environmental Affairs, how are we addressing the outdoor air exposure regarding our indoor gyms for basketball or for indoor sports? How are we modifying that, our ventilation?
I don't believe there was any modification made necessarily to the gyms. I could be speaking out of turn. I would definitely defer to Brian Pagella on that for sure. I know that the gyms were evaluated, as was most of the indoor spaces, to be appropriate for students being in there. But I'd have to pass that question to Mrs. Hoffman. And she may know a little bit more than me on that for sure.
Yes, and I'll let Mr. Klickstein may have the most information on this because he's basically in charge of buildings. But I do know Brian Pagella with CARES money, which was very fortunate we had that we did extensive purchasing of filters and cleaning. And we also addressed many issues with air exchangers on roofs and buildings throughout the community. We're very fortunate to have the CARES money. And we spent it wisely on bringing in outside contractors to, in some cases, replace some of these ventilators. And I don't know if you can speak more to that, Mr. Klickstein.
Not necessarily to that, but I just want to remind everybody, when we went through the project with the bleachers, a lot of that stuff was looked at and taken care of, because obviously we had some issues with some asbestos and things like that. So I'm pretty confident we're pretty good with that, but I will double check with Brian in the next couple of days.
Thank you, and thank you again for all your hard work, as well as the administration.
Other questions, concerns? Mr. Bonavita, I know you're on the phone. Did you have anything? I can't see you raising your hand. Like I didn't know this.
Yeah, just in the basketball, Dave, you talked about how we all know, basketball is, a lot of it is, especially on the inside, is, covering the person you're guarding.
Sure.
And basically body on body, to fight for position and everything. So what's been done to protect? Because they're definitely going to be, the length of the games are longer than 15 minutes, obviously, and the chance of somebody being body to body longer than 15 minutes, what I think would be in play. So do they have? I mean, what's the mask? How does the mask fit into basketball?
Well, every sport, now all the sports, at least so far, including the winter sports, except for gymnastics, they were allowed to remove a mask, and now swimming, all the athletes have to be masked, whether they're in the game or not.
Okay.
In basketball, they'll have to be masked. There was a lot of discussion with the sports medicine committee on modifications for basketball. We kind of pushed the basketball committee and had them come back to us for a second meeting, as we did with hockey as well. Basketball was our biggest concerns with basketball was under the hoop. So under the basket, there are those inbound plays from under the basket, offensive or defensive inbounds, are all done now from what they would call the foul line extended. So it would happen from the side of the court rather than directly underneath. And I was asked not too long ago what difference that would really make. And it really eliminates, it doesn't eliminate, but it cuts down on players looking to stack in the paint, like in the key, under the hoop, looking for a quick basket, where if it's a side out of bounds, you're more likely to spread out. So that was one of the things that we sort of demanded from the basketball committee. The other was that the jump ball was eliminated, and the enforcement of the NFHS rule on obstructing a player who's not in the play. For example, those that are basketball people, like Mrs. Hoffman will definitely get this one, is like jamming the cutter. Like if someone's cutting through the lane, stepping in front of them to sort of get in their way, it's semi-illegal. You really should, but a good basketball team will do that. they'll just step in the way to cause them a delay. Well, that's actually a violation of the rules, which is going to be enforced. The officials have been kind of coached up on making sure that some of the off-ball contact is called. Hand checking. They always talk about hand checking every year, and then it's never called. This year, I think you're going to see the contact that doesn't have anything to do with maybe going after a loose ball, like sort of like soccer. We eliminated that shoulder-to-shoulder contact in soccer. I think you're going to see a lot of that in basketball. So those were some of the things that they eliminated. I found it interesting that one of the chair of the basketball committee let us know that they checked around throughout the country of all the sports that are actually playing, and Massachusetts' guidelines are the most comprehensive, I guess. I'll put a positive on it. I think that we've taken more care to watch it. I think basketball is definitely the toughest one. I would agree with you 100%.
Well, thank you very much. I read everything and we were given very detailed, a lot of information. You could tell, a lot of information came from people who were experts in various fields and, gave input. And I intend on voting in favor of this. I think that it's probably the most, as you use the word comprehensive, this is probably the most comprehensive set of documents that I've seen, and concerning COVID and sports. I haven't seen any from any other town, but it's you see bits and pieces in the newspaper and articles, and it's much more comprehensive than people think. So thank you for your work in this.
Thank you, Ms. Doobie.
I was just wondering if the eligibility requirements have changed due to the fact that we're a block schedule now.
Academic eligibility has changed a little bit. What we basically have done, we're not the only school who's in a block schedule situation right now. Minnechaug Regional has been block schedule for many years. So I spoke to Steve Hale, the principal, and also Mike Roy, who's a good friend of mine, who's the athletic director over there, is just awesome at his job. And they use a 3 out of 4 class, type credit thing. So they have to pass 3 credits out of the 4 to be eligible. Mathematically that's, even a little bit more stringent than our 5 out of 7. It's right about the same. And it really kind of worked out for us to do that. So that's what we're using from an eligibility standpoint. Some seniors may be taking only 3 classes, and I worked with the guidance department. They were very, very, they were great. They were really good at communicating to the students. Look, you're only taking 3 classes here, so make sure that you're passing all of them if you want to be eligible. So there was, and that happens year to year. There's kids that don't take a full schedule for whatever they're on work study or whatever. So, so it's worked out from an eligibility standpoint. We're right about the same. I think we're as rigorous as we ever have been, which I think I'm very proud of here. I think it's good that we're as rigorous as we are.
Thank you.
Any other questions, concerns? Mrs. Reed?
I just want to thank you, Dave, for all your hard work. I know a lot of work has been put into it, and it seems like everyone's very thorough going through it. So I agree with Mr. Bonavita. We haven't had any problems with the spring sports, and parents have a choice whether to put their kids in sports. So like Mr. Bonavita, I'm all for it. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other remarks, Mrs. Hoffman? Are you good?
No, I'm good.
With seeing none, is there a motion to approve Agawam Public Schools to participate in winter sports, specifically boys and girls swimming and diving, boys and girls basketball, boys and girls alpine ski, boys and girls ice hockey, to commence on January 11th, to end on February 28th, and following all MIAA rules modifications, sport-specific, and guidelines. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Make the motion, seconded by Ms. Doobie and Ms. O'Connor and Mrs. Reed and Mrs. Ruoff. Alexis, would you please call the roll? If you're in favor, say yes. Opposed, say no.
Mrs. Reese,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mrs. Rua,
Yes.
Mr. Minio, Ms. Stube,
Yes.
Mr. Bonavita,
Yes.
and Mayor Sapelli.
Yes.
6 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. With 6 yes and 1 absent, you've approved Agawam High School going forward with winter sports with all MIA modifications and guidelines. Mr. Stratton, we can't thank you enough. I know enough people did that already. You've been very instrumental, not only in Agawam, but statewide. David doesn't blow his own horn, but Dave is a certified trainer, which adds so much more to his position during these times, and we're very fortunate to have him. So thank you, Mr. Stratton. Thank you for all the work you've done with this, getting organized, getting information out to us, which made this meeting very easy because of the preliminary work that you did.
I appreciate the kind words. Thanks, everybody.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Reed, seconded by
Second.
Ms. Vita and Ms. Stube. Alexis, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Reed,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mrs. Rua,
Yes.
Ms. Stube,
Yes.
Mr. Bonavita,
Yes.
and Mayor Sapelli.
Yes.
With 6 yes and 1 absent, we are adjourned.
With 6 yes, 1 absent, we are adjourned at 4:31. Merry Christmas, happy, healthy, safe New Year to everyone. Thank you.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
you, Beth.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Alexis.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Merry Christmas.
Bye, everyone.